Ladies and gentlemen, the Stanley Cup has been hoisted in the year 2024. This is Pucks and Brews. I am your host, Michael Shade Sparacino, alongside, as always, Liam, the Shellmaster Godimer. And before I go any further, I must get the straw out, put it into the cold brew, and take a sip because the NHL season is officially over. While I do that, Liam, how are you?
I'm doing well. No drink for me today on Pucks and Brews. I kind of feel a little left out. That's okay. I could see the relief that you've just gotten after taking your first sip of a cold brew. That's awesome.
I
You also
needed
got a
the
donut
caffeine.
there too next to you. Want to tell our fans about that? What do you got?
Say that again. I was too entrenched in the cold brew.
Talking about your donut.
Oh
What
yeah,
kind of you?
Boston cream, baby.
Hmm.
My favorite.
All right.
I could
Well,
literally have one of those things every single day, but thank God I don't.
they are delicious for sure. So, but yeah, I'm doing well. Florida Panthers, Stanley Cup champions for the first time ever in their franchise's history. Happy for them. Congratulations.
Yeah, and me and you were doing a live watch along last night on stream with the sports hit list that was not planned until
Right.
literally like 8:30 last night, and we went on around like 10:30, but that was a lot of fun and
Mhm.
got to watch it live and yeah, had fun.
Yeah, it was a great time. Great talking with Justin and yourself about the Stanley Cup Final and hockey overall. And again, I'm excited to do it again with you, Pucks and Brews.
Yeah, that is our friend Justin Buford, who actually has been on the show before. It's been a long time. Kind of around the same time you were on Chirp and Chat.
Yeah, gotta have him back. Gotta have him back.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. I would love to have him back next episode, maybe, because the Hurricanes are about to have a very interesting offseason.
a lot going on with the Canes. Yeah,
A lot
for
going on
sure.
with a lot of teams.
Yeah, the couple of teams didn't waste any time getting their trades in before the Stanley Cup Final ended. So I think a
Oh,
lot of GMs are chomping at the bit to kind of improve their team and kind of make their mark. So
we'll get back to this in a second, but I just love how, oh, there's a game seven of the Stanley Cup final tonight. Nope, here's a trade 45 minutes before. Like, come on, GMs. Like, ugh.
yeah.
Best sport, worst league.
The timing was interesting on that one.
Yeah,
But
that should be illegal. It really should. Like having announcing trades should be illegal day of like important games like that. That's just me.
game seven of the Stanley Cup final doesn't get any more important than that. Yeah, I
Nope.
don't I don't mind it. For me, it was just more of the timing.
Yeah.
We were that close to the start of the game. It's kind of let
Right.
the game have its own aura and magic behind it. And there doesn't need to be any added news that kind of takes fans' eyeballs away from what's really important. So,
Yeah. But may we
but
take a
now those
yes.
trades are important because the Stanley Cup final is over. So
Yeah. But
talk about
may we please take a moment of silence to acknowledge the end of the NHL season. Thank you. So, I mean, we got way more to talk about than I thought we would, come a couple days ago, but a lot of shit happened. So let's get right into it. I mean, first off, let's get it started with the goalie trades here. Let's go with the first one that happened 4 or 5 days ago. Jacob Markstrom on his way to the New Jersey Devils from the Calgary Flames in exchange for Kevin Ball, defenseman, and a 2025 first round pick, which I believe is top 10 protected.
Yeah, the Devils have been long in the market for a number one goaltender. They've talked to the Bruins about Linus Ullmark, who we'll talk about in just a moment. They've obviously talked to the Calgary Flames on many occasions about Jacob Markstrom. UC Saros, that Justin mentioned out of Nashville as well, was definitely a target for them. And they kind of go middle of the pack and go with Markstrom. I think the high end, right, would be Saros, and I think the safe bet on who you're going to acquire to be your starting goaltender was Jacob Markstrom. They give up Kevin Ball, who again I thought had potential. He has size, so those physical attributes you cannot teach. So I think that's what the Calgary Flames were looking at. And of course, Markstrom was always a guy that they were going to look to move if the trade was right. And for me, Calgary found the right deal. They get a top 10 protected first round pick. And I mentioned this on Chirp and Chat yesterday. Um, the chances of that pick being in the top 10 are very low. So again, I think they've solidified having themselves a mid to late first round pick where maybe you can go and draft another goaltender. Maybe you can shore up your team in other ways with a defenseman or a forward. So I like that for Calgary. They get a player on the back end who can kind of fill the role of that big enforcer defenseman that every team needs, to be physical and kind of set the tone at the start of games. And for New Jersey, they get their starting goaltender. They shore up the one position that has been holding them back. And as a GM, that's the goal. You want to make your team more complete, and Tom Fitzgerald did that without giving up a ton. I think if you would have asked Devils fans what the return would have been, I think most would have mentioned the first round pick and probably a top 10 protection attached to that, which they got. But I think they would be looking more along the lines of Dawson Mercer or Alexander Holtz, maybe not Mercer, but definitely Holtz or a forward prospect that could really be impactful. But they trade away Ball, somebody who is not in their immediate future, again, in order to shore up their most important position on that team right now, because they're good in every other area. Maybe shore up the defense a little bit, but they have a number one guy in Dougie Hamilton back there. The forward group is great and young and ready to break out. It's just been the goaltending that's been in flux. And now Jacob Markstrom comes in, albeit towards the end of his career, but still playing some awesome hockey. So,
Yeah, and he comes in at a 31.3% cap retention from on Calgary's end. So I think the Devils cap hit for him is 4.125 million, with Calgary holding back 1.875 million. And now they have a goalie tandem of Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen, who they are paying, at least cap hit wise, a combined 6.05 million. To get that goalie tandem for that price, that is some good GMing.
yeah, the 31% cap hit, like you mentioned, the retention on that cap for Jacob Markstrom is the big thing for me. Again, if you're going to trade away a defensive prospect and somebody who's had NHL time and a first round pick for a goaltender, you better make sure that it's the right trade. So New Jersey gets the right player and they get him at the right price. And again, like you mentioned, Jake Allen, that's a solid backup to have. And if I'm a Devils fan, I'm confident almost every single night that as long as the defense, plays well and you get your goal scoring, the goaltenders will be there to backstop you to a victory more nights than not.
Yep. And we're probably going to be talking about the Devils a lot next week because, the NHL decided to, in an 8-day span, have game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, the draft, and the first day of free agency. Best sport, worst league. But there's rumblings about Brett Pesce, but I'm not going to go too far into that because nothing's official yet. But if they do that, that's pretty scary. Good young defensive core they will have. But moving on to the next goalie trade. And this one was a little bit puzzling, at least from the team that was giving up the goaltender. The Washington Capitals and the Los Angeles Kings swap 1-for-1 Darcy Kuemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, when I saw this, I was like, what is Washington doing? And I saw this and I went, LA, well, they needed a goalie.
Yeah, that's how I saw it too. And again, like Dubois, certainly his stock has fallen quite a bit over the last number of years. But remember, he started his career in Columbus. He was the former number 3 overall pick, and I believe the 2016 draft. Couple of 60-point seasons under his belt. The last 60-point season he had was in Winnipeg, and that was 2 seasons ago. Last year, 40 points in 82 games. Wasn't great defensively, 1 goal in the playoffs. And of course, there's been a lot of chatter about Dubois since his career began, about a lack of effort at times. It's hard to kind of call out a player for that, but of course, the infamous shift that he had in Columbus, a lot of hockey fans remember. And again, he didn't really fit too well in the locker room in Winnipeg. And again, but that's where he had his 2 60-point seasons outside of 1 60-point season in Columbus. So if I'm Washington, I'm banking on Dubois coming in, seizing the opportunity, playing well alongside the greatest goal scorer of all time in Alexander Ovechkin. And if I'm the Kings, like you mentioned, it's a position of need. They needed a goaltender. And Darcy Kuemper, at the end of the day, did not fit the Capitals' timeline because they're not going to compete for a Stanley Cup anytime soon. They already have Charlie Lindgren, who has taken over that starting spot. I think that was kind of the story right there. Once we got to the first round of the playoffs, Capitals Rangers, and Charlie Lindgren was in the net, during game 1, and played, the rest of that series. So, Again, Darcy Kuemper's won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. He now goes to the Kings. And again, very similar to what I said with the Devils. The Devils needed a starting goaltender, somebody who could shore up that position. Jacob Markstrom does that for the Devils. Same thing with the Kings. Darcy Kuemper is going to come in, and I think we're going to see the goaltender that he was in Colorado, less of the goaltender that he was in Washington. And again, if we see a significant improvement from the Kings, I'm talking like winning 1, 2 playoff rounds come next year, Darcy Kuemper is going to be a big reason why. A little bit perplexing as to why Washington acquires Pierre-Luc Dubois. But again, you're banking on a change of scenery. I mentioned the 60-point seasons. He's had 3 seasons of where he's had north of 25 goals. This is a talented player. 6'4", 225. He's got the physical attributes. He plays down the middle. He can win faceoffs. If he is just committed and in the right situation, you have yourself a pretty good player. And if you're Washington, you signed Kuemper and made a mistake, not with the player, but with your timeline and where you are as an organization. Clean your hands off of Darcy Kuemper and you bring in somebody, who I think the Capitals management foresees to have a significant turnaround next year. And I hope he does. I do. And Washington's a better culture fit, right, for Dubois than Columbus. Again, Columbus was a losing team the 4 seasons that he was there. They weren't winning much. And then again, Winnipeg, there were a lot of issues in that locker room. I'm not going to say that it was just Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode, but that can come from multiple different waves. So for me, I don't hate the trade. I don't get it too much on the Washington side, but for the Kings, they walk out with a win here. That's a contract in Pierre-Luc Dubois that they've wanted to get out under for a very long time here. So. And same thing with Kuemper in the Capitals in a way, but both teams improve. And I think when you're looking at 1-for-1 trades like this, that's what you want. You just want to see improvement. And I think both teams will improve because of each of these players next year. Confident in saying that.
Yeah, this is a trade that for once actually makes sense for both teams. You don't really see that too often.
Yeah.
But the what two things that you brought up, the compete level and the want to be there, is my two major question marks about Pierre-Luc Dubois going to Washington. Because if you look where Washington was last season, if Ovechkin doesn't pick up his game post All-Star break, they're on the outside looking in and they not in the playoffs. But I'm and I did see this too about Charlie Lindgren. It's like I believe he's already either 29 or 30, and you don't really too often see goaltenders who take the reins for a season or two get long-term success at that point in their career. So this could come back to bite them in the ass in that particular aspect, but time will tell. Lindgren did, as you said, play very well against us. He deserved a better fate than a sweep that the Rangers handed the Capitals. But something that you said last night that I loved that you brought up, Dubois is finally in a situation to succeed because he goes to LA from Columbus. He's behind Anze Kopitar, Quentin Byfield, and Adrian Kempe. In Columbus, he was behind. I mean, he kind of was the guy, but they didn't really have too much talent at that point in time because after 2014, let's be honest, 2014 was kind of their best shot to do any damage, even though they did win the one series against.
Well, and that's what I was about to bring up, the
Yeah,
2018-19 season. That was the one year where he wasn't the guy. Artemi Panarin was on that team, had 87 points, and Dubois had a 61-point season himself. So again, I agree with you in what you're saying, but there were points, especially when Columbus was playing well, that he was not the guy. And again, we'll see kind of what it looks like with Washington, but continue.
yeah, that's going to be the biggest question mark. Can he rise up to the occasion now that he's going to have a bona fide top six role? It's going to be him and Dylan Strome. And you
Yeah.
got Ovechkin. Maybe he can unlock something with that because ever since Backstrom left, Ovechkin hasn't been the same. But you got Oshie there too. You got a few young players, and we talked about this last night also. The Capitals are a deceptively young team compared to a couple years back. But can they strike gold? That's really what it boils down to here with the Capitals.
Right. And the last time Nicholas Backstrom was on the Capitals, I mean, albeit he only played 47 games, Capitals had 2021, 2022 season, Ovechkin had 90 points, 50 goals, 40 assists. So for me, that was the last time he played with a legit number one center for more than half the season. And now, for the first time in 2 years, he's going to be able to do that. And look at his point production after that 90-point season over the last 2 years. 75 points 2 seasons ago and 65 points last year. We don't want to see the drop off of Alexander Ovechkin. Nobody wants to see that. The entire hockey world is behind him in hopes that he breaks Wayne Gretzky's goal scoring record.
Us
Pierre-Luc
included.
Dubois, yeah, us included. Pierre-Luc Dubois is an asset that I think helps him do that. And for me, it's going to sound a little weird. I think the Capitals organization is in a little bit of a weird spot right now. I think that they recognize that their window to compete is not here. And very seldom do you see a team transition their entire focus to the success of one player. I don't think these next few seasons for the Capitals are about winning a Stanley Cup or getting into the playoffs. The next few seasons are about getting Alexander Ovechkin that goal record and doing right by the player. That's what I think it is. And I think if they got to be in the bottom of the Metro just for that to happen, I think, okay. Every team has to go through their rebuilds, and Washington had a ton of success alongside Pittsburgh. And again, we're seeing both of those teams enter that territory. But for me, the number one focus for the Caps is getting Ovi that goal record. And this move shows me that they're committed to that. And I think they're both going to have a good year. I think Ovi is going to smash that 65-point mark that he put up last season. He played 79 games. He only missed 3 games last year, and he was less than a point per game player. The first time in a while. He had 75 points in 73 games 2 seasons ago. So it's a very, very unique trade. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that trade room when that went down. Just to see the reasoning behind it, just to see if we're on the same wavelength. Yeah, fascinating trade.
Yeah, and the Kings are hoping for a bounce back season from Darcy Kuemper, which I mean, they're in a little bit of a weird spot too, because over the last couple of years, they've made a number of questionable trades. But can they get a bounce back from Kemper? I mean, that's a real question mark because in the last couple seasons, they have traded away. Just let me pull up the tweet here where I have everybody's name. They have traded away Adrian Kempe, excuse me, Alex Iafallo, Gabe Vilardi, Rasmus Kupari, Darcy Kuemper in 2018, and a 2024 second rounder. And in exchange for those trades, they got the 1 year of Pierre-Luc Dubois, which we just mentioned, Scott Wedgwood, Tobias Reeder, and Darcy Kuemper back this year. So that was three separate deals, by the way. So if I'm LA as a fan of the Kings, you definitely have to raise your eyebrows at that one and go, do we have the right person as GM?
He
But
was he was there for 19 games in 2017-18. Played well, 930 save percentage, 2.10 goals against average. And if you look at that roster for the Kings that year, who he was going up against, it was just a Hall of Famer, Jonathan Quick. So it's kind of hard to take the reins from a goaltender that is, of course, a franchise legend and somebody who was not planning on retiring. And I think the Kings were in a situation similar to the Rangers, if you ask me. Not necessarily with an incoming goaltender, but when the Rangers had Henrik Lundqvist at the end of his career, just didn't know what to do, and they kind of hung on to him because you want to do right by the player. And I think in 2017-18, that's what they did. Even though they had the better goaltender in Kuemper right in their hands, that's what I kind of think led to the trade and inevitably Los Angeles moving on from him. And again, it's never going to look all great for a general manager. You're going to have your misses. You have to go and try to make a splash when you have a team that you think is going to legitimately compete for a Stanley Cup. And for me, I didn't love the acquisition of Pierre-Luc Dubois just because of the character issues and, what happened in the locker room. But in terms of the player, when he got traded to Los Angeles, there were a lot of teams interested in Pierre-Luc Dubois.
oh yeah,
A lot of people wanted him. And Rob Blake was the one who was willing to pay the biggest price. So I'm not ready to attack Rob Blake just yet and say that he's a terrible general manager. Let's see how the Kings do this year. There's a lot of young talent there. You finally have a number one goalie in there. You don't have to rely on inconsistency with the goaltending and the back end. Let's see what this team can do.
yeah, and Dubois on Washington's end did have a full no move clause kicking in July 1st. So at this point in time with the trade. He did not have to waive it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how his career with Washington plays out. Is he going to want out after one season, two, even earlier? We will see.
I'm going to make
But
a prediction here,
hit me.
and I'd love to go back to this. I think that Pierre-Luc Dubois will be a Washington Capital the rest of his career.
Interesting.
I think he's going to find his home in Washington. He may not be a number one center. He may not be that guy, but I think we're going to finally see Pierre-Luc Dubois stick with this Capitals team. No pressure.
No
No
pressure.
pressure. Seriously. What pressure do you have if you're on the Washington Capitals right now? Vito Ovechkin.
I
They
think the
over.
pressure is more on the Capitals end.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I I yeah, I'm not making that prediction, but
I'll happily eat my words. We'll see.
we'll see indeed. And now we're moving on to the trade that happened about 45 minutes before Game 7 last night between the Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators, an interdivision trade. Holy crap. Linus Ullmark going to the Ottawa Senators. No cap retention, $5 million in exchange for Joonas Korpisalo at a 25% cap retention of 1 million being held back by the Ottawa Senators. Prospect Mark Kastelich, hope I'm pronouncing his name right, and a 2024 first round pick, number 25 overall. At first glance, this is an underwhelming return for the Bruins, a great addition for the Ottawa Senators, who were in desperate need of a goalie because Korpisalo just did not work out there. He was not ready to be a full-time goalie. He was not ready to be the guy. I think he'll be better suited in Boston behind Swayman, but this is another trade. A team had a need. They went out and addressed it. Good on Ottawa because I think this is a good move for them.
Yeah, a lot of layers to this trade. First and foremost, Boston, of course, unloads Linus Ullmark. And again, like I mentioned last night, I'm a massive fan of Linus Ullmark. I think he's one of the best, top 15 goaltenders in the league. But the unfortunate part of it is that he was playing alongside a goaltender that was just a tad bit better. Just a tad bit better. And that is coming off of Ullmark's season last year, not this past season, but the year
Yeah.
before that, 22, 23, where he was sensational. It was in the Vezina conversation. So I don't think anybody in Boston was really expecting to have to trade Linus Ullmark after that season. But as time went on, and as we started to see how well Jeremy Swayman was performing in the playoffs, the question mark grew larger and larger surrounding the goaltending situation. Who do you go with? Is it Ullmark, who has one more year on his deal with a modified no trade clause for $5 million a season? Or is it Jeremy Swayman, again, who is younger, came up through the system, and again, has really proven his worth in between the pipes for the Bruins? On the Ottawa side, right, you need a goaltender. You signed not a great contract with Joonas Korpisalo, who has really struggled. You saw him as a number one goaltender. That's not what he is. And you go out and you get Linus Ullmark. In my opinion, outside of UC Saros, who I'm not entirely convinced he's going to get traded, I thought Linus Ullmark was the number one goaltender on the market. I would have rather had him than Jacob Markstrom. So that's how highly I think of Linus Ullmark. The only disappointment for me on the Ottawa end is that there's one more year left on this deal. I would have liked to see it come with an extension.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would have liked to see. But for Boston, hey, you get yourself a first round pick, you get yourself a prospect. When was the last time we saw Boston trading away an asset for a first round pick? It's been a while. So again, they're clearly trying to replenish their system. They're trying to get younger. They realize that a retool on the fly is better than just breaking it all down. I'm not saying that's where the Bruins are headed, but again, like I mentioned last night, Ullmark and Swayman, that combination was a huge reason why they overachieved, in my opinion, each of the last two seasons. Because on every single night, you had a chance to win. And on a majority of the nights, you had the better goaltender. And now they don't have that. But they get a first round pick. And for Ottawa, I am going to praise Ottawa, even though many people do it, including yourself, and get bit in the behind.
every year.
Ottawa made a great trade here, and they get a number one goaltender, and they trade away Corpusalo, which was a bad contract. This is a good trade for the Senators, and they are going to see improvements because of it. I can confidently say that.
Yeah, and the other player that Boston got back in this trade, Mark Kastelich, is a 25-year-old forward, a fifth round pick from 2019, who has played the last three seasons in Ottawa, 16, 65, and 63 games, respectively, 25 total points in 144 games. I mean, he's a bottom six forward at this point, but on the surface, underwhelming return for Boston, and I think it's going to continue to be unless they hit on that first round pick.
But they had to trade him,
Yep.
right? And again, he had a modified no trade clause. So there was only a certain number of teams that Boston could have traded him to. And that's why, and again, we talked about this with Justin during last night's show. That's why I thought he was traded in division. I didn't, I just thought it was because of a lack of suitors or a lack of teams that Boston was going to be able to trade Ullmark to. And again, like I mentioned, who are the teams that are looking for a goaltender right now? LA just got their goaltender. So for me, and the Devils just got Jacob Markstrom. So again, the amount of suitors were really running out. And Omar goes and gets his chance to become a number one goaltender, a chance that he absolutely 100% deserves. And I'm really intrigued to look at the statistics at the end of next season to see who had the better year. Linus Ullmark or Jeremy Swayman. Did Boston make the right choice? I think that they did, based off how Swayman played in the playoffs. He was, outside of Pastrnak, of course, he had that, series clinching goal against Toronto in Game 7. I thought he was their best player in the
Oh,
playoffs.
hell yeah.
That's how good Swayman was. But it's no knock on Linus Ullmark at all.
No, none whatsoever. I mean, having two starting goalies is a good problem to have.
Yeah, no, it is. But Boston came to a point where, again, Ullmark was making $5 million. You gotta kind of explore your options at that point. But again, they bring in Corpusalo too, who's making close to the same amount of money. But I think you kind of get security in Corpusalo. He's been better as a backup throughout his career that Justin was mentioning last night. And again, he's not going to have any pressure on his back. That all falls on Jeremy Swayman. Swayman is the number one guy. Finally, it's
Yep,
his net.
well deserved. And moving on to the last trade, and with two pieces of news involving this team, the San Jose Sharks have traded for forward Ty Delandrea from the Dallas Stars in exchange for a 2025 fourth round pick. To me, this is a trade where the Sharks are in need of young talent and they're hoping a change of scenery for Delandrea unlocks something because he was the 13th overall pick, I believe, in 2018, and things just didn't work out. I mean, I think they drafted Thomas Harley the year after, if I remember correctly, and he kind of took, precedent over Delandrea, and rightfully so, because he's turning out to be a solid young player for Dallas, along with Wyatt Johnston and guys like that. But the Sharks need bodies, and I, like I said, hoping for a change of scenery.
Not much here to this trade, to be honest. Delandrea, again, like you mentioned, a former first round pick. There's potential there. May not have shown what he's been able to do with the Stars, but again, that's a loaded Stars forward group. It's kind
Yeah.
of hard to break through and get yourself a legitimate chance to show what you're able to do. And on the San Jose Sharks, that doesn't exist. Maybe Ty Delandrea has an opportunity next year to play. I'm not going to say that, but maybe he does play with Macklin Celebrini, just gets a cup of coffee with him. That's how thin their forward depth really is.
Oh yeah.
So, the Sharks can afford to mess around here, bring in guys that, they think could have a turnaround. And they give up a fourth round pick. There's not really much to that. Like you mentioned, Shades, the Sharks trying to reach the cap floor and just trying to bring more bodies in overall. So that's the mentality I think Mike Grier had behind this trade, but not a bad one to make. You got a former first round pick who is drafted within the top 15, albeit he has not performed well, for a fourth round pick of your own. That's what young rebuilding teams are supposed to do. Regenerate. And then the Sharks did that. So,
Speaking of reaching the cap floor, the second piece of news, let's backtrack slightly here. First and foremost, the New York Rangers put Barclay Goodrow on waivers, and then the San Jose Sharks 2 days later subsequently claimed him. And, well, his $3.6 million cap hit certainly going to help them get to the cap floor. The Rangers get out from a contract that never should have been signed in the first place. And there were rumblings about San Jose being on Goodrow's modified no trade list, which why he had trade protection to begin with is still baffling to me. But the rumors going around were the Sharks were, in fact, on his no trade list, and this was a workaround to get him on the Sharks.
right. Again, we're never going to know kind of how this was all worked out behind the scenes. I don't want to necessarily speculate either. But again, Barclay Goodrow is a former Shark. Where did Barclay Goodrow play the best hockey of his career? Thought he's played well with the Rangers, but I think he really blossomed into the type of valuable player that he has become in many general managers' eyes in San Jose. Then, of course, he goes to Tampa Bay. He wins the Stanley Cup, but it was his experience with the Sharks that really turned him into this bottom six player that, again, GMs want. And for San Jose, veteran leadership, bring him in, a former Shark. Again, they can afford to take on a $3.6 million cap hit, even if it's for the next 2-3 years. So I don't hate the move if I'm the Sharks. It does look a little bit fishy, I guess you could say, right? That the Rangers really desperately needed to get away from one contract this offseason, whether that be Trouba or Goudreau or whoever you see that to be. And the Sharks, Mike Greer, who is a relatively new GM with San Jose, formerly with the Rangers and the Rangers organization, goes and claims a player and does the Rangers a favor. So I think Drury definitely explored the opportunity of trading Goudreau prior to this waiver claim by San Jose. There was obviously nothing there. San Jose had a level of interest, and they were able to work around that no trade clause. But for me, just on the Rangers side, I don't love it. I mean, I love getting rid of the cap hit. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
And
it's
not
a
having to give up an asset to get rid of the cap hit.
yes, 100%. But I don't think the Rangers did well by Barclay Goodrow here, to be honest. I
Yeah,
think
this is
work
one of those,
around
yeah,
a
just
no
to
trade
piggyback off of
clause.
that for 1 second, this is one of those trades where the brutal, vicious business side of hockey is very evident.
Right, and maybe Chris Drury thought, Barclay Goodrow would love to go back to San Jose. He played a lot of good years there. Maybe on the same hand, Barclay Goodrow, or on the other hand, rather, Barclay Goodrow wants to compete for a Stanley Cup. And he was ingrained in this locker room. He was a big presence for the Rangers. He may not have put up the points, but again, being a productive part of a hockey team is more than just the points that you put up. How about the block shots? How about the influence on the penalty kill? How about how good he was in the playoffs? How about when you needed a good shift from your energy line? Barclay Goodrow was behind that. And again, I don't blame Barkley for being upset at all. Like you said, it's the brutal part of the business. I probably would have went about it a little bit of a different way, especially if Barkley is upset about it. Because again, you want to make this a destination to where players want to come, And again,
And right
maybe
now, the Sharks are not that.
and right now, yeah, the Sharks are not that. But free agents could be looking at the Rangers. Oh, Tyler, let's just use an example. Tyler Toffoli maybe wants to sign with the Rangers, a 4-year deal. Do you or a 3-year deal? Do you kind of take a second look, do a double take, and like, well, Barclay Goodrow just signed that $3.6 million deal and they just shipped him to San Jose, or Patrick Nemeth, same thing, sending him over to Arizona. The Rangers have had a lot of contracts that have not worked out that they have just completely dumped off. I don't know how I feel about that if I'm a player. So it didn't exactly sit well with me, but you move on. The transaction's been made. San Jose clearly wants the player. They'll do right by Barclay Goodrow, but I can't stand here and say that the Rangers did that themselves. But they get rid of $3.6 million. They get rid of the contract. And at the end of the day, the job of a general manager is to improve your hockey team from where they were last year. And by doing that, by making this move, Chris Drury did that. And like you said, he did not have to attach a pick with Barclay Goodrow, which is rare when it comes down to contracts that have a good amount of term and a significant amount of finances behind it. Again, for a player statistically that doesn't warrant it.
Yeah, and to go back to the Sharks for a second, they have a current projected cap hit of 55.27 million. They still have 32.7 million in cap space, but they still, I believe, still need to get to the cap floor, and they only have 15 players signed at the moment, with one of them being a goalie. So they need to sign at least five players, and that cap space is going to get eaten up pretty quickly. But San Jose is bringing in a good locker room guy who is hopefully they can, you know, he can be a guy that the young players on that team can look up to, including Macklin Celebrini. And yeah, the Sharks, I mean, they got a long way to go, but they're trying to reshape that locker room with the two moves that we've talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but they're going to be bad for a long time because I mean, I'm not really going to get into it, but they have made a number of bad moves the last couple seasons, and it's kind of the reason why they're in the situation that they're in.
We will see how it all works out for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Now, with all of that being said, we have mentioned this multiple times so far. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final was, in fact, last night. The Florida Panthers have hoisted the Stanley Cup for the first time in their history. And for a couple days there, that was not looking like the case. I
No, it
mean,
wasn't.
they
No.
uh they gave themselves a mini heart attack, didn't they, Liam?
Yes, they did. I think that must have been the most painful Stanley Cup game 7 to watch. And I don't think it was any if you're a Panthers fan, right? Or if you're an
Right.
Oilers fan, especially if you're a Panthers fan, you have a 3-0 lead in the series. You win game 1, game 2, and game 3 pretty handily. And then games 4, 5, and 6 you got punched right back. And I would argue 5 times harder than the punch Florida threw. And the momentum was squarely on the Oilers side for game 7. But Florida comes through on home ice. And like you said, they win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. It's always awesome to see. Very
Right.
happy for the Panthers fan base that they get to experience the glory that we experienced back in 1994 before we were born. So good on them and congratulations.
Yeah, I need to see them win a freaking cup in my lifetime, the Rangers. We'll see. But to sum this series up, I actually in game 1 thought that Edmonton got the jump on them and were the better team, but Sergei Bobrovsky was just like, "No, I'm going to be a brick wall today." And that's exactly what happened because he shut them the hell out. And Panthers go up 1-0. And then game 2 was literally the complete opposite. The only difference, or the only similarity, I should say, was Sergei Bobrovsky decided, yeah, I'm going to be a brick wall again, and only lets up one goal, which was probably a softie. But I mean, he was lights out those first two games and two periods. But going into game 3, Panthers up 2-0, looking to get a stranglehold on the series. And they look great for the first two periods of game 3, more of the same from game 2. And then the third period of game 3 happened, and Edmonton just took all the momentum, even though the Panthers went on to win game 3 and get a stranglehold on the series. I mean, Edmonton just took all the momentum and carried it literally the next 3 games.
They did. Shades, for me, you just discussed game 1, right, of the Stanley Cup final and how Edmonton controlled that and Bobrovsky stole it. I think for me, game 1 and game 7, pretty similar. Edmonton threw a lot at Bob game 7 last night. And again, I saw your jaw drop a few times on Chirp and Chat, but 20 seconds before I saw it.
Chirp and
On some
chat
of the
special.
saves, on some of the saves that Bobrovsky made. I think there was one point where McDavid was point blank and his stick was tied up by Gustav Forsling. Like, it is a team effort. And the Panthers were able to put it all together. Just to quickly surmise the series, like you said, I thought Edmonton controlled game 1. They end up losing game 1 because Florida has the better goaltender. Game 2, Florida, clearly the better team. Okay. Game three, like you said, Florida had control over that over the first 40 minutes. Edmonton just not able to fight back enough in the third period to tie that game. Okay. Then you move on to game four, five, and six, all Oilers. All Oilers. Those puck bounces that they were not getting the first three games of the series, they suddenly got. And for me, the series evened out. And I didn't necessarily think when it was 3-0 Panthers that Florida had as much of a stranglehold over the series as typically teams that are up 3-0 do. And of course, the game seven is forced. History not made in the form of a team down 0-3 coming all the way back to win the Stanley Cup Final. Only it happened one other time. That happened in the 40s, the 1940s. We're almost approaching the 2040s here in the next 15 years. So it just goes to show you how rare that is. But, a huge sigh of relief, I'm sure, from Panthers fans, the entire Panthers roster. I don't have a hat here next to me, but a tip of the fake cap to Paul Maurice on winning his first Stanley Cup. Paul Maurice was a coach who was ready to retire after his time in Winnipeg. Again, it wasn't easy in Winnipeg. We talked about it a ton with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Try being the head coach. And Paul Maurice has gone through a lot in his career to where he has suffered a lot of disappointment. And for me, to see a coach who was on the cusp of retiring just a couple of years ago to win a Stanley Cup in game seven on home ice for the first time in that franchise's history, it was really special. It really was. And that's coming from a Ranger fan who had his heart broken by the Panthers just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and Paul Maurice improves his game seven record to 5-0.
It's right up there with Pete DeBoer. I
Yeah, I think what is Pete DeBoer, 7-0?
think he's 6 or 7-0.
Which is just ridiculous.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, now that Maurice has won, I mean, he kind of becomes the next head coach. It's like, is it a matter of time or is he going to have extremely bad luck?
Can I throw out a fun stat for you?
Oh, hit me, please.
So the last two Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights, the head coach before their current head coach
Was Gerard
was
Gallant.
Gerard Gallant.
I literally saw that while we were on the Zoom break.
So if history repeats itself, Mr. Peter Laviolette next year would get his chance, of course. Just a coincidence there, but really happy for the Panthers. They, like I mentioned last night on Chirp and Chat, right? I genuinely felt like the best team in hockey, even though the Rangers won the President's Trophy, the deepest and best team in hockey at every single position, that's including head coach, won the Stanley Cup. That's it.
And,
And at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want the best to win,
oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, going into the playoffs, we looked at the top three teams in both the East and the West, and I believe both of us had Florida as our number one. And obviously, I personally had Carolina as two and Rangers three, but I've talked about this so much, my thoughts on this by now. But the Oilers, I kind of had them as a de facto three in the West because I just looked at the other side of the bracket and went, if they were on that side of the bracket, would they have made it this far? And we can't really play the what if game, but hey, they got through the Western Conference and almost won the whole thing. But to get back to the finals for a second, we talked about game four, five, and six was all of them. They scored eight at 5 and 5 respectively. And I mean, Bobrovsky didn't even stand a freaking chance in those three games, let's be honest. And it really put some serious doubt into the Panthers going into game seven, but they did just enough rallying in that locker room. They got back to just enough structure to get through them. And Bobrovsky did, in fact, play one hell of a freaking game last night. And Panthers got it done. And I really am happy for Paul Maurice because I've liked him for a long time, going back to his Winnipeg days.
Paul Maurice's son, Jake, is the play-by-play broadcaster for the Florida Everblades, who just won the Kelly Cup. So
Nice.
pretty cool there. Nice celebration in the family. One more shout that I'd like to give Shades real quick. Actually, let me
Yeah,
just touch on game seven real fast.
sure.
The Panthers played their game in game seven. They played structured, they played defensive. Their goaltending was great. Bob looked as good last night as he did during the entire playoff run. I might have to go back to that spinning, ridiculous one-arm save he
against
made
Tampa.
against Tampa Bay, as the last time he had a game as strong as he had last night. He was outstanding. He saved his best game of the series for the most important game of the series. The forecheck was absolutely relentless. Let me tell you, Shades, I was brought back last night watching the third period and specifically the final 10 minutes to the way the Rangers looked when they were down 1-0 in game 6 in Florida against the Panthers. Edmonton looked like a tired team. They looked exhausted. They looked worn down by the forecheck. Once they got themselves into the zone, it was one and done. Florida immediately got back into their structure, broke the puck out cleanly, and again, it was just eerily similar to the way the Rangers were shut down in the Eastern Conference Final. And that is a testament to the way Florida plays. Now, on to what I was going to say before. One unsung hero for the Panthers that I would love to give a shout out to. It's not Paul Maurice. It's not any of the assistant coaches. It's not any player that played on the ice. It's Bill Zito. Bill Zito is the best general manager in hockey. The best. Look at some of the trades that he's made. Vladimir Tarasenko at the trade deadline, a third-round pick and a fourth-round pick. Steven Lorentz for Anthony Duclair, a trade where, again, maybe a lot of Panthers fans were shaking their head. Steven Lorentz was on that fourth line of a Stanley Cup winning team. You go back a little bit, Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, the trade to get Matthew Tkachuk and a fourth-round pick. I mean, I could go on and on with the amount of trades that they have made that have been great, even ones that haven't worked out. Claude Giroux, they get from the Panthers. They give up Owen Tippett in that deal, probably not great in hindsight. But again, they went for it, even in years that they did not win the Stanley Cup. So huge shout out to Bill Zito. He was pissed off after the Panthers weren't able to close it out in game 5. Of course, the infamous bottle throw in the suite. But at the end of the day, he's celebrating with his team in a rightful championship. But this team and this depth was built by Bill Zito.
Oh yeah.
Every single move he made outside of that Giroux trade, and again, you have to go for it when you have a good team, has hit. So Bill Zito, for me, he's the mastermind behind what we saw out of the 2023-24 Florida Panthers.
Oh yeah. And
Back-to-back in the Cup final, too. Not easy.
yeah, and we've actually somehow have been seeing a lot of that recently. Penguins did it 16-17. Lightning did it 3 years in a row, 2020 to 2022, and then the Panthers this year and last year. So
Two more trades real quick I'd like to bring up that Bill Zito has made.
hit
The
me.
Devin Levi trade to Buffalo, where everybody thought that Buffalo got this amazing starting goaltender. You know who Florida got in that trade? Sam Reinhart, who scored the Stanley Cup winning goal. Sam Reinhart had 57 goals in the regular season. And Florida gave up a 28th overall first round pick that is not in the NHL and Devin Levi. You go back before that. How about Brandon Montour for a
Oh
third
yeah.
round pick from Buffalo? Brandon Montour. How about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who was bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, and Bill Zito goes and signs to a one-year contract? Who wanted Oliver Ekman-Larsson last offseason? I didn't. I don't
Nope.
think anybody did. He was quarterbacking the power play on the Stanley Cup winner. How about you go and look at another trade? How about Sam Bennett for a second-round pick and a prospect? Come on. Bill Zito, man, I'm looking at these trades and he has not missed. That's the last one I'm going to mention, but he has been absolutely ridiculous. And the reason why their lineup is the way it is because of him. So, wow, oh, wow. That is how you build a roster and a Stanley Cup winning roster. Nobody beat them in their depth. Nobody that they were going to come across had better depth than the Panthers. Nobody.
Yep.
Up front, back end, goaltending, nobody.
No, absolutely. And here's another insane McDavid stat. Wayne Gretzky got 47 points. This was tweeted 4 days ago. Wayne Gretzky got 47 points in the 1985 playoffs. He had a point on 48% of his team's goals. Again, this is as of 4 days ago. McDavid was at 52.5%. Just absolutely in freaking sane.
And it just goes to show you how good Connor McDavid needed to be.
Oh, yeah. And this
For
was as of 5 days ago. McDavid is 5 career playoff assists behind Patrick Kane and has played 71 less games. So I believe that was prior to game 6.
Yeah, not a fan of McDavid winning the Conn Smythe, to be honest. I understand that the stats speak for themselves. But again, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in that way. Um, I think the Conn Smythe should go to a player on the winning team. I didn't think it was an easy decision, and I thought McDavid was so far ahead of the curve that, I kind of understood.
Yeah.
Wasn't a fan of that, but a historic run from
Oh yeah.
Connor. We finally got to see him in the Cup final. That's what fans have wanted ever
Yeah.
since he's been drafted. Let's see him on the biggest stage, and we did. And he did not disappoint. Neither did Draisaitl.
Yeah, I'm low key kind of tight that they beat Dallas because I was rooting for Dallas to come out of the West. But we got to see him in the Cup final. I mean, his team came up just ever so slightly short, but he got a chance. And this is a stat that when I saw, I was just like, holy crap. So this was tweeted 6 days ago, and it has only gotten better since, technically. Games 4 through 7 this postseason, the only loss Stuart Skinner had in games 4 through 7 was last night. Just absolutely freaking insane. He had a goals against average under 2. He had a save percentage north of 930, and he had a shutout. I mean,
And
that's
I
just
think
incredible.
I think it's a part of a bigger narrative shades in terms of goaltenders. Of course, Stuart Skinner doesn't end up on the winning side of Game 7 last night. But again, look at the goaltenders who have won the Stanley Cup over the last number of years. You look at Aiden Hill. You look at Jordan Binnington, who has really struggled. Is the goaltending position overrated in terms of winning a Stanley Cup? Of course, Bobrovsky wins the cup, and he was a big reason why. He wasn't great in the series, though, outside of Game 7. I think Skinner, though, going back to your point, finally put everything to bed surrounding the Oilers' goaltending situation. And that's a problem that I really didn't think was going to be solved. But Skinner had an outstanding playoff run. Full credit to him. I will say this, though, little bit of a hot take, but the broadcaster in me needs to mention it. It was a little soft. The game-winning goal was a little soft.
Yes.
It just was. And he was fantastic. And you need more goal scoring. And if you're going to win game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, you need to put more up than one. But it was soft. And and that's what, and again, you look at that play. That's what Florida does. They come in on the rush. They have two guys drive towards the net, and you have a ripper on the right side ready to funnel it towards the cage. And again, it snuck through Skinner. I know a lot of Edmonton Oilers fans are biting their tongue watching that goal because it's a tough one to give up. At not at that point in the game, but when especially in game sevens in the playoffs, the next goal, more times than not, is the one that wins it. But again, the Oilers, simply put, even though that's a soft goal, they do not get to the Stanley Cup final without Stuart Skinner. So that's the main point you should take away.
Hey, their offense in games 4 through 6 put up 18 goals.
Yeah,
And in the
yeah.
game that mattered the most, they scored once.
But again, that's what the Panthers do,
Oh,
though.
yeah.
And I think they had success against Florida, and not just because of this, but I think that this is the reason why. How about the extra day's rest that the Oilers got in between games versus what,
Oh, yeah.
let's just say, the Rangers got? They were able to rest themselves up. They were able to get more energy behind them and play a better game. But once it came down to game 7, I think Paul Maurice had his team thinking, no if, ands, or buts. We are committed to our game. We lose game 7 and we're playing our game, so be it.
Yep.
But they played game 7 playing how they've played all season. And again, just like how they shut down the Rangers in game 6, where they won 2-1, right? So same score, same style of play. And again, the two offenses in the Rangers and the Oilers, who are as high powered as they come, shut down in game 7 and in game 6. Closeout games at home, outside of game 5 for the Panthers, they're going to lock you down. And they showed why.
Oh, yeah.
They did everybody.
Hey, Oilers had their chances last night, but I mean, they had two open nets. One at to Luosterainen got right in front of a shot, blocked another one, and then the other wide open net on the left side, where literally you saw me go, "How did that not go in?" I I believe that was Sam Bennett. I could be very wrong though, but somebody
Talking
did
about
get.
McDavid.
Yep,
McDavid, that was Forsling who tied up
Forsling.
Dick. But again, right? You could talk about those open nets, but if those defensive plays aren't made, like you got it, that's commitment.
Yep.
Like Rainen, like a young forward getting in front of a shot like that, I don't, a Stanley Cup Final Game 7, you never like to assume, but I don't know if every single kind of rookie forward, would have laid his body out on the line like that.
Mm,
Gustav Forsling, like he's been getting a ton of coverage and a ton of notoriety for how good he's been after,
oh,
the
yeah.
waiver claim and all that. He just tied up the stick of the best player in the world in the final 90 seconds of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
Oh, yeah.
That's commitment. That's all Paul Maurice
Yep.
and Zito.
Yep. And to go back to the Conn Smythe for a second, I mean, I'm not, I kind of agree with you. I'm not the biggest fan of giving it to the losing team, but I mean, McDavid just, he earned that.
In this case, I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm still not a fan of it, but I get it.
Yeah, no, I kind of would have been surprised if it didn't go to him because I mean he broke one of Gretzky's records that everyone thought was going to stand the test of time, and he broke it by multiple points. It just he played sensational this fucking playoffs.
And he did. And again, it was like a death by a thousand cuts for the Panthers, right? It's not one player that is doing everything. And that's why I think it was really tough to give the Conn Smythe to anybody on the Panthers. It was a full team effort. Nobody stood out above anybody else. Bobrovsky was great in game 7. He wasn't, awesome the previous 3 games where the Panthers lost. So I think a lot of factors go into it. But again, like you said, McDavid, an absolutely historic run and a well-deserved Conn Smythe. But I'll say this. I don't think McDavid gives a rat's ass about the Conn Smythe.
No,
I don't think he cares. So,
no.
and nor should he. It's all about Liam. It's
Ye-
all about Liam. It's all about winning. just read an email that said, "Hey Liam," but sometimes it is all. I don't know.
That's pretty fun. Well, I mean, when you're doing play-by-play for the Atlanta Gladiators, it kind of is.
Right?
Yeah, but I believe uh McDavid becomes the sixth player all time to be a Conn Smythe winner on the losing end and the second non-goalie.
Who was the last one?
I forward, I think, they mentioned it last night and I forgot to make a note of it, but it was apparently in like the 60s or the 40s.
Okay. Again,
So
just
it
yeah.
does not happen very often at all. Like it may not happen again in our lifetime. Like that's how rarely it happens.
And also, just want to put this out there as well. Cool little nugget. The 2014 #1 overall pick wins the Stanley Cup over the 2015 #1 overall pick. So,
This is
uh,
true.
congratulations to Aaron Ekblad. But like you said, 34 assists for McDavid in 35 games, 42 points. I mean, the goal scoring was down a little bit, but he was generating all over
Yeah,
the ice for 8 penalty minutes. 8 penalty minutes. Like that's coming off of a 132 point season. I mean,
just
100,
unreal.
153 the year before. Think about this. He had 153 points in 22-23. Sure, he plays 11 less games, but he had 20 points in that playoff run in 22-23. He had 42 this year, a 22-point increase over 11 games. So he's
Jeez.
averaging 2 points a game in this playoff run, more than he was last year.
My God.
Just
Just
just just an absolute cheat. Just
this
an absolute cheat code.
this guy is unreal. And with the Panthers winning, that extends Canada's cup drought
Yeah.
yet another year, and they have lost five consecutive, dating back to the Rangers beating the Canucks in '94, as well as the Lightning beating the Flames in '04, the Hurricanes beating the Oilers, the same Edmonton Oilers in '06, the Bruins beating the Canucks in 2011, and well, actually, Montreal lost it a couple years back in the bubble to the Lightning, and
Yeah.
this is the ones that I'm referring to outside of the Montreal one are solely game sevens, and that came down this year as well. Canada has lost five consecutive Stanley Cup Final game sevens. Just wild,
Yeah.
wild.
Absolutely wild. Um, but again, I think Canada approaches this Stanley Cup final, in hindsight, a little bit differently. Uh, I think the Oilers made all of Canada proud. to come back from a 3-0 deficit, to just force a game seven, to just, give yourself a chance of winning one game and making that history for a country. I think there's a lot of appreciation for the Oilers from fans in Canada that aren't necessarily fans of the Oilers. So Canucks, Flames, Maple Leafs. Again, this was a great run, and they came close, very close.
Close,
But
but
far,
no cigar. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Podcast hosts were supposed to podcast host and co-host were supposed to finish each other's sentences. So
Hmm.
able to do so right there. It's good.
But yeah, this is what I grew the beard out for, lengthy playoffs, game seven, cup final. This is going to be trimmed soon and I'm going to be sad, but it's also gotten hot as shit out. So I will enjoy it from that perspective. But season's over. Congrats to the Panthers again. I mean, the draft and free agency are going to be here before we know it, but we still got some stuff to talk about. So let's get right into that. So, I mean, there have been a couple pieces of news over the last 24 to 48 hours as my friend sends me a nice tweet, but couple players that I want to pay mention to who have announced their retirement in recent days are number one, former Ranger Derrick Brassard, who his time as a Ranger, I absolutely loved this guy. I mean, from day one, you just knew they had something with him. The first playoff series he played with us against the Capitals, he was one of our better players in 2013. And then fast forward 14, 15, all these years later, I mean, I still can't get over that third line we had in 2013-14 with him, Benoit Pouliot, and Matt Zuccarello. Still one of my all-time favorite lines, period. Definitely my favorite Ranger line to this day. But I mean, I missed him when he got traded, but I understood the trade at the time and it was pretty good trade for us for at least, a couple years. But gonna miss him playing hockey, gonna miss watching him, and I hope he enjoys retirement. I absolutely loved him as a player.
I did too. He was the definition of a fantastic New York Ranger, right? He started his career in Columbus, and of course, he comes over shortly thereafter, I think in 2012, 2013. Played a handful of games with the Rangers, but he really made his mark in the postseason. What he was able to do in those 2013-14 and 2014-15 runs, 12 points and 16 points, respectively, including that hat trick in Game 6 in Tampa Bay. We mentioned it last night. The slapper on the partial breakaway against Montreal. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of outstanding memories from this player. Like you said, we had to move on from him to acquire Mika Zibanejad and a second-round pick. In hindsight, Zibanejad, has been criticized heavily. I make that trade 100 times out of 100. It was just time to move on from the play. I don't think it was a trade that they had to make, but it was a trade for the Rangers' future that they had to look at. And again, it was a good one. And then, his career after that, I mean, again, he was a big game player, big game brass. That was his nickname, right?
Oh yeah.
He didn't really get a lot of opportunities in the playoffs after he departed from the Rangers. Of course, had that awesome run in Ottawa where they go all the way to double overtime of Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final. Put up how many points in that run? 11 points in 19 games. So he was still producing. Had a cup of coffee with the Islanders, the Panthers, the Avalanche. Remember that when he was with the Islanders?
Yes, I do.
About 66 games there, but
That pained me.
again, he's a journeyman. But what I can say is that Brassard played his best years as a Ranger,
Oh
and
yeah.
he was flat out clutch. And
Oh yeah.
again, that third line was, like you mentioned, was a privilege to watch. The chemistry that Derrick Brassard had with Matt Zuccarello specifically was unlike any combination I've seen since on the Rangers. I mean, they worked that well in tandem together. There was one goal I remember. Maybe you can watch it afterwards. Maybe you remember it. It was a spin around pass from Zuccarello. Rangers were playing the Wild at MSG on home ice. And he just made a disgusting pass to Brassard right in front. And there was no look. It's like he had eyes in the back of his head. That's just how well those two players knew each other. and played alongside each other. And Benoit Pouliot too. Shout out to him, former fourth overall pick of the Edmonton Oilers. So we'll bring it all full circle.
Hmm.
But I loved Brassard. I really did. I really did. And I'm going to miss him. And congratulations on a great career. And I wish he could have come back to the Rangers towards the end of
Yeah.
his career. It just didn't make sense. So
Yeah, but thank you, Derrick Brassard, for the memories. And I still will never forget the overtime game winner he scored against Pittsburgh in the playoffs, where he was the only one that knew it was in. And then, just in case it didn't go in, he gets right back up in the play, gets his head right back up out of his ass, puts the puck in front for Benoit Pouliot, who ends the game. But he got the OT winner. And yeah, big game brass, baby.
big game brass. That was an exciting one for sure. I actually just pulled up the goal on my other computer. I can't show you, unfortunately. Um, maybe it wasn't from Zuccarello, but again, Brassard, big goals. I think he had a couple of overtime winners against Detroit. You go back to um, like you said, privileged to watch him. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Derek Brassard. And the other player who announced his retirement was Andrew Cogliano, who at
yeah.
one point was gunning for the all-time Ironman streak, and then George Parros decided to give him an insanely stupid, dumbass two-game suspension that I still baffles me. But this is a guy that missed 27 games across 17 seasons. Durable guy. He was a key player in Colorado's, quest for the cup 2 years back. And I mean, hell of a career dating back to Anaheim and even before that. I mean, hell of a player, durable player, got to go out as a Stanley Cup champion. Congrats to him.
Yes, congrats to Andrew Cogliano. A solid player all throughout his career. And again, when you miss that few of games, the dedication to hockey, the dedication to getting yourself better, and the dedication to your team, it doesn't go unnoticed. And he was one of those players that was consistently committed to those three things.
Oh yeah, 100%. So congrats to him on an awesome career, and I hope he enjoys retirement as well.
Indeed.
Now, to go to the Blue Jackets for a second, they fired their head coach this past season after literally 1 year. They're in a bit of a predicament where they are, but they're trying to get a new set of eyes in there. Even their new GM was just like, I have nothing against the guy. It's just we're in a really bad spot, and I kind of just want a new, fresh set of eyes in there. And Pascal Vincent was he. Hopefully, he lands on a coaching staff somewhere.
Yeah, again, never an easy situation to go into a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets and become the head coach. And Pascal Vincent, right? Of course, not a ton of experience under his belt before he accepted the job. And any general manager, right? It's going to be tough to intentionally keep a coach around when the team just isn't performing up to expectations. So, and again, Vincent was brought in after the Mike Babcock debacle.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of time to kind of go out and get the right head coach? I'm not sure there was. There was a lot of pressure. The Babcock thing had happened, I believe, during training camp. You needed to get a coach at the start of the season, and you bring in Pascal Vincent. It hasn't worked out. You move on. I hope he gets another opportunity in the NHL. But I think the big thing here is that the decision to hire Vincent in the first place was rushed
Oh yeah.
because of the extraneous
Unforeseen circumstance.
circumstances right surrounding Mike Babcock. So now the new management of the Columbus Blue Jackets has an opportunity to bring in the coach they want for this team. So
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be a team to keep an eye on during the offseason too, because they are just in a very weird spot after making a couple moves a year or two ago that just did not work out. So yeah, going to be interesting team to keep an eye on. So to touch upon some free agent signings and or at least official and reported ones, the Toronto Maple Leafs signed goaltender Justin Woll to a 3-year contract. Nothing's official yet, but that is believed to be the
Justin Woll.
I said Joseph Woll, didn't I?
No, you said Justin. It is Joseph.
Oh, okay. Jesus Christ. Okay.
I had to call. I just had to.
I don't know if I would have caught myself on that one, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, they
Last,
signed him to a 3-year deal, hopefully to shore up their net, their goaltending situation. He played well enough this past season to warrant an extension. And I mean, we say this all the time. I don't think goaltending's their problem. I think the structure and the way their defense is built is the main problem. But he definitely earned this extension.
yeah, he most certainly did. It's funny. Joseph Woll kind of reminds me a little bit of Jeremy Swayman out in Boston, and it just took Boston to give Swayman that number one starting job. Of course, a little bit different, right? With Ullmark, there's never really been a clear answer with Toronto's goaltending, but Woll played really well. If he did not get injured in Game 6, he would have played Game 7.
Yeah,
And does the result change? Maybe. Because the Maple Leafs scored the first goal of Game 7, and they end up losing in overtime. It doesn't fall on Samsonov at all, but I think Wool gives you more consistency. You got a younger goaltender in there, and you got a player that, again, is ready to seize the opportunity. So I thought the AAV was a tad high, but I think that this is a player that Toronto is paying for what he is going to provide in the future and not what he's done in the past. So I think they legitimately see him as their number one guy moving forward. And it's good that Toronto was able to lock somebody down. And again, we see this so much. This has been the goaltending episode, right? And in terms of acquiring goaltenders and how that looks alongside the tandem in terms of the money. Seems like teams want to keep, the combined AAV that they're paying their two goaltenders around 8 million. That's kind of the safe space. And again, I think that they're able to do that there, going with Wool, and then figuring out, what the ideal backup situation looks like. But again, Toronto roared back in that series against
oh, yeah.
Boston. Jacob Woll, well, oh my God.
Hmm.
See, he did it to me. See, he said Justin, I say Jacob, and it's actually Joseph. And Joseph Woll, again, he was terrific. So
Not too
well
often that we
deserved
screw up on the
extension.
same thing.
I know, right? Yeah, that might have been a first on Pucks and Brews, eh? But
Yeah, maybe. I mean, all right. So, what do you remember what the reported AAV was with Wall?
I think it was somewhere between 3.5 and 3.75.
Okay, that's not bad at all.
That's not bad. And again, like
Better than Corpusalo's deal.
yeah, well, it's kind of hard to find
Yeah.
a deal worse in terms maybe the Bennington contract. Uh, but just a quick look at Joseph Wall. Oh my God. No, I was about to say Jason. Jesus. It's Joseph. His name,
Joseph.
Joseph. Not Jason, not
Joseph.
Jacob, not Justin. It's Joseph.
Joseph.
Um, yeah, again, he spent time with the Marlies. He was really good with the Marlies, right? 2.37 goals against average in 22, 23, and 21 starts. He came from Boston College, where he had a save percentage over 910 all 3 seasons he was there. This is the guy, if I'm Toronto, I want to label as my starter. So maybe I take that back. That 3.5 million looks not too bad, but he's just got to perform up to expectations. And I
Yeah.
think he will. He's 25 years old, and he stepped up to the plate for the Maple Leafs in a pressure-filled series against Boston
Oh,
and
yeah.
brought them back into it. So
Yeah, good luck to him. And for the Leafs' sake, I mean, hopefully he can steal a series for them, but they got a lot of work to do.
they got a lot of work to do, but for now, I think goaltending is shored up and where it's supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
So good on them.
Another extension we need to talk about is Filip Hronek signing an extension with the Vancouver Canucks. And you go back 2 years, and I go, there is absolutely no way in hell this guy is signing a contract of this magnitude. But fast forward to now, he had a coming off a great season with the Vancouver Canucks, and he earned himself a bag. 7 years, excuse me, 8 years at 7.25 million. Full no move clause for the first 4 seasons. Excuse me, the first 3 seasons. No, the first 4 seasons, and a 15 team no trade for the final four. So half full no move, half 15 team no trade clause.
Hmm. What do you think?
Uh, I mean, he's coming off a great season. I don't know. Like, I don't know. He's one of those players that never stood out to me of going, this guy needs to be signed 8 years, north of 7 million. So that's kind of where I'm at because I'm not going back to his days in Detroit. I mean, he was good. I don't know if he was 7 million by 8 years good, but I thought he's decent top four defenseman.
The cap is going to continue to go up.
Yeah,
And, as long as that does, right, the cap hit of this deal isn't going to look too bad. But you said 8 years
eight
you
years,
would sign to? Yeah, I'm always weary of 8-year deals for anybody, unless you're Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or Artemi Panarin, somebody of that stature. But again, you look at some of the 8-year deals that defensemen have signed over the last number of years. I'll give one to you, Jacob Trouba. Like Rangers are dying to get away from it. And there's how many years left? 3 years, 4 years, or maybe 2 years left on that deal
two
now.
years.
Yeah, 2026, he'll be a UFA. Again, Hronek had a career season this year. I mean, he was pretty good in Detroit. I mean,
Yeah,
he was a consistent 30, 40 point guy from the back end. And he's got size too, he's 6 foot 190, skates well, has played overseas before, was a really good American leaguer with the, Grand Rapids. Played in Czech for a season in 2020, really did well over there. So he's kind of expanded his palette in terms of where he's played around hockey. And then, of course, this past year, like you mentioned, I mean, almost 50 points in 81 games. But he was under a good amount of criticism from Canucks fans after the postseason run. 13 games played, 2 points,
mm,
2 points on the back end. And again, for a guy similar to Trouba, right? Um, you just need more than that, and you need the defenseman to be more than a one-dimensional player. But with that said, the Canucks gave up a first-round pick for this player in the trade with the Red Wings, and you need to make sure your investment pays off, and that's why I think they sign him. But for me, it's a little bit too long of a contract. I don't hate the AAV. But Vancouver locks down a top four defenseman, and they need to do that more often. I think they're in a good spot with combination of Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek and see what else they're able to fill out, in terms of young guys or potential UFA signings. They're headed in the right direction, and Hronek's a part of the future. You can't just let him walk for nothing after trading away a first round pick for him. So
yeah.
I get it, but I wouldn't have gone 8 years.
No. He is 26 years old. I thought he was older than that for some reason, and he's coming off a career high season, as we mentioned, with 48 points.
Right.
Uh, I don't know. He doesn't have a 50-point season under his belt yet, so that contract is a little questionable to me.
And I want to point out one more statistic here. Those 40-point seasons that I mentioned with Detroit, only one season was he a plus, and he was a +8. The other 2 years, he was a -29 and a -18.
Oof.
This year in Vancouver, he was a +33. That's a career year if I've ever seen one. And that's why I'm a little bit wary. He has the most points he's ever had in a contract year. His plus minus is a ridiculous +33. And with the way he performed in the playoffs and the amount of years he was signed to and the AAV, if I'm a Canucks fan, it could leave a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. It could.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving
But
on to the win.
26 is young. 26 is young.
Yeah,
So,
26
like
is
you said.
very young. Yeah. Moving on to the Winnipeg Jets, they re-signed defenseman Dylan Damelo for a cap hit of 4.9 million. I did not see the term on that contract just yet, but I'm gonna do that right now. 4 years. So 4 years, 19.6 million gets him just under $5 million cap hit, and he's coming off a pretty good season for them. And I mean, top four defenseman, that's a good contract in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And again, Winnipeg needs to keep around the guys that have been playing well for them. And I like DeMello, both on the offensive side and the defensive side of the puck. So again, this is a good contract, and that's a much more manageable cap hit,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Two different types of players, but 4.9 million, over 3, 4 years, I think that gives Winnipeg the flexibility that they need to kind of fill out their roster and compete for a Stanley Cup. But DeMelo's a part of that, and he's a valued piece around the league. And hey, if Winnipeg's in a different situation in a couple of years from now, and maybe they decide on trading him, I think there would be a lot of teams interested in Dylan DeMelo at a $4.9 million cap hit. Like that's reasonable, especially with where the cap's heading.
Oh yeah. and he's 31, plays the right side of the defense. Yeah, I think they'll get good value out of this contract.
Yeah, I think they will too, and they got a pretty good defensive core over there. I mean, Damelo outside of 4 seasons, right? Or 3 seasons has played his entire career. Yeah, well, he had a cup of coffee with Ottawa too. But again, 5 seasons in Winnipeg where he's been pretty damn consistent. So talk about plus minus. Damelo was a plus 46, a
Oh,
plus
jeez,
46
jeez.
this year.
My God.
His highest mark in his career before that plus 46 was a plus 10 each of the last
Oh,
3 years. So what that tells me is this is a player that's only getting better. Sixth round pick of the Sharks. Nice payday.
oh yeah.
That's what you can see.
Yeah, if only I could be making 4.9 million, but that's not happening.
That would be nice, right?
Yeah, that would be very nice. Really, really nice, actually. And the last of the free agent signings prior to the
Uh,
NHL draft, or at least re-signings, I should say, Casey Middlestadt coming back or extending with the Colorado Avalanche, 5.75 million, and I clicked on Dylan DeMello again. God damn it. 5.75 million for 3 seasons. So, I mean, hey, Middlestat came in, played pretty damn well for them. And I mean, 5.75 for second line center. That's pretty good.
Yeah, again, I've always liked Middlestat. Again, he was drafted, eighth overall in 2017, has kind of taken a little while to find his footing on the NHL stage. Never really fully put it together in Buffalo at 59 points in 82 games, his best season. But like you said, he goes over to Colorado in what was a 1-for-1 trade. Bowen Byram
Oh
for
yeah,
Casey Middlestat. That was it. And he put up 9 points in 11 playoff games. And again, was producing quite well. And I think you surmised it perfectly in saying that he's the second line center that Colorado needs. And again, you're only as good as your depth down the middle. And for me, Nathan MacKinnon and Casey Middlestat is a really nice 1-2 punch as far as the center position is concerned. And again, I'll also touch on this. This is an extension that they had to sign.
oh yeah,
Again, Bowen Byram, he's going to blossom in Buffalo. You need to make sure you get your value for that player. Um, and again, I'm going to keep mentioning it, because we have to. The cap keeps going up, and in 2 years from now, or even a year from now, 5.75 million for a second line center is a steal.
absolutely.
It's a steal. I think he's getting underpaid right now. And again, like recency bias, say what you will, 9 points in 11 playoff games. I think he fits in pretty damn well in Colorado. 10 points in 18 regular season games, including 4 goals. Maybe he finds it. Maybe he's like a Sam Bennett. Maybe he's like a Sam Reinhart, goes to a new team and again really finds his game. Maybe he just can't. Maybe Buffalo just can't draft anybody anymore. Maybe that's just it.
Well, I mean, they don't exactly give players the right, opportunity to prosper over there.
But you see Reinhardt, right?
Yeah.
Reinhardt, like I would have viewed Reinhardt on a similar plane as Middlestat going back a few years ago when he was first, thought to be moved from his team. And now Reinhardt scored 57 goals on a Panthers team that is utilizing him the right way. I can't wait to see what Middlestat does in a full season on an Avalanche team that will utilize him in the right way, just like Reinhardt was.
Oh, same. Yeah, gonna be a fun player to watch in the coming years.
And he's first round picks, right? Like all of these guys selected top 10 overall. They're selected there for a reason. Change of
Oh, yeah.
scenery. It's like there is a lot to that.
Oh yeah.
And we're starting to see that, especially with Middlestat. So good, really good contract for the team and nice on Casey for finally getting paid 7 years after his draft.
Yeah. Going back to the Winnipeg Jets for 1 second. So there has been some rumors involving prospect Rutger McGroarty and how he is almost definitely at this point on his way out. So he's going to be a prospect to keep an eye on either prior to or during the draft because I think Winnipeg is 100% dealing him. And they're in a little bit of a weird spot right now because they're coming off of two really, really good regular seasons and two early playoff exits. And this year, especially being a bad playoff exit where they got completely outplayed and looked literally the polar opposite that they did when they were playing in the regular season.
Yeah, changes definitely have to be made for Winnipeg, and I think it's going to be larger than Rutger McGroarty, but I think Nick Ehlers definitely could be on the block. I think maybe not this year, but there are not a lot of teams looking for goaltenders right now because we just saw that huge wave of trades regarding that position. But maybe Connor Hellebuck holds some value. Like again, I think they're really trying to transition where they are as a team. As far as Rutger McGroarty, I mean 2 years at the University of Michigan. I mean, he put up 52 points in 36 games in the Big Ten. So 14th overall pick by the Jets. There's a lot of value with this guy. So maybe they try to sneak their way into the top 10 of the draft, by utilizing the asset that is McGroarty and, try and retool your team that way. But no doubt about it. I totally agree with you, Shades. The Jets had a great regular season and they just fizzled out in the playoffs. And I think it's really disappointing for a lot of fans that expected them to take that leap,
Oh, yeah.
especially in the postseason this year. So,
Yeah. Again, I've said this about a couple teams, but I mean, this is very true for this Winnipeg Jets team. They are definitely going to be at least a team in the West to keep an eye on because they need to make some moves. I think they have to, switch around the core a little bit there because I think they've shown their true colors.
right,
But
right.
we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see. We're going to have a lot to talk about next week. A lot to talk about next week.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, no shortage of news right after the Cup final for sure.
Yep. We got the draft and free agency starting, so it's going to come fast and furious.
Yeah, and speaking of the draft and free agency, we got to talk about the Rangers for a quick second. I mean, we touched on the Goodrow news before about him being put on waivers and then subsequently being claimed by San Jose. But speaking of cores that need a switch up, I mean, Chris Drury better have a trick up his sleeve because if they run it back with a majority of the same players, I think we're going to see the same exact result.
I think the transaction involving Barclay Goodrow tells you all you need to know. He's not content with running it back with the same group of players. So, I think there's a lot more to come here. After the claim from the Sharks on Barclay Goodrow, the Rangers have projected cap space of just under $13 million. But that is, of course, with Roslovic as a UFA,
He's not coming back.
and if he comes back. Wenberg as a UFA, if the price is right, I'd like to. Wheeler, I think, is going to retire. Um, you know, RFAs and Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider, Gustafson and Ruido also UFAs. Those are washes. You got Shesterkin who needs to get paid
Next year. Yep.
next year as well. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. And just looking at the Capfriendly page right now, Zibanejad has a full no movement clause, $8.5 million. It's taking up 9.7% of the cap right now. Um, Kreider is under contract for another 3 seasons at $6.5 million. Hedo will be a UFA in 27-28. So you got, I'm sorry, not Hedo. That's yes, Hedo will be a UFA in 27-28. Kako's an RFA next
Yeah,
year.
they just re-signed him to a qualifying offer, but he's still in play to get moved.
Lafreniere is an RFA next year. That price tag's going to go up.
Yep.
Will Cooley is an RFA next year. So Jimmy Vesey's a UFA next year. So again, this team's going to look drastically different from where they are. And there's no question about it, Shades. They need a shakeup. And I don't envy the job that Chris Drury has because it's a tough one and there's a lot of pressure. But also, I think it's important to keep hindsight in mind in that the Rangers lost to the Stanley Cup champions. They did. So this team is close. And there have been many teams in the NHL who have been close and have just not gotten over the hump. And then they do. Look at the Colorado Avalanche, right? I see them on a pretty similar trajectory as the Rangers. But again, I think this offseason more than any other offseason, that's upcoming or, in the immediate past, is extremely important for the Rangers, to maximize their Stanley Cup window. And again, a ton of decisions to be made. And I didn't even mention him, Jacob Trouba,
2 more
$8
years.
million this upcoming year and then $8 million the year after that. Then he's a UFA. What do you do there? So you don't want to put yourself with dead cap, but Is he a hindrance more than a help?
Uh,
And that
very
goes for
well
a lot
could
of
be.
these guys. That goes for a
Yeah.
lot of these guys. What do
Yeah.
you think? What's your first course of action, I guess, after the Goodrow claim, if you're Drury?
Try and lock up Schneider to a cheap bridge deal. Try and sign Lindgren to a preferably 3 or 4 year deal because I would be very hesitant going long term with him because I mean, don't get me wrong, love the player to death, love the guy to death, but I'm he gets banged up a lot. Like he's literally the epitome of a guy who is probably going to retire in his mid 30s.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Schneider first. I mean, I think there's no question that you extend him. I think the more
Cheap bridge
years that
deal.
you have a contract, the better. I don't even think bridge deal, to be honest. I
The
think,
only reason I'm saying that is because I think he played himself out of a long-term extension this postseason. He very well could have.
he very well could have, but you also got to look at who he was playing with. Schneider was playing with Truba at times. Schneider
Gustafson.
Schneider and Gustafson too. Definitely more often than Truba. And again, you need to put these guys in a position to succeed. And again, when the playoffs come, everything is magnified.
Yep.
Every single pass you make, every single decision you make, whether to skate back or pinch up or take the shot, not take the shot. So for me, I would base Schneider off of the value that he brought during the regular season, not off of the playoff run. Let's see what he looks like with a legit partner that can help elevate his game instead of bring it down. So I actually disagree with you. I probably wouldn't go bridge deal. I would probably 4, 5 years. Like that's how confident I am in Braden Schneider that he's going to be a top 4D for the Rangers. Like I'm not worried about him at all. Lindgren, on the other hand, that's a little bit of a different story. You mentioned that he gets banged up a lot, and he could be the epitome of a player that retires in his mid 30s. I wouldn't let him go, to be honest. I wouldn't. Maybe a short-term deal, but he just plays too well with Adam Fox, and that's the pairing you need to roll with, and you need to keep your number one D happy. And again, you never know kind of what the relationship looks like, but I would try to bring Lindgren back. I believe his last contract, he was getting paid $3.3 million annually.
Sounds about right.
I I would be really hesitant to go over $4 million a year. I'd like to, keep it in that range. Like maybe a sweet spot's like 3.75. Um, and again, because there is that risk with his injury history and how long he's going to last playing this game. And I only say that because Lindgren gives it 110% on every single shift. I don't care if he separates his shoulder, he'll be right back out there, say pop it right back in, I'll be right back out there. But that's dangerous sometimes when you're looking at the longevity of some of the careers that your core players could have. So a lot of big decisions to make, but if I were in Chris Drury's seat, I would sign Schneider to a long-term deal, like 4, 5 years, and maybe try to get that AAV down or give him the AAV he deserves. And for Lindgren, something a little bit more short-term, but also keep your number one D that you just signed to a $9.5 million deal until 2029, 2030 happy. And I think Fox wants to play with Lindgren. But if he doesn't, then you move on.
True. Yeah, they currently have 12.8 million in cap space. I mean, those two guys, I mean, we both are on the side of re-signing, but they still have to address two main issues. Uh, One being first line right wing. Could we see Patrick Kane or Steven Stamkos sign? Maybe. I think Kane is more realistic because he's going to come cheaper. So that's where I'm at with that. And then you really have to take a long, hard look at Heedle on the sole basis of his injury history. Because if he gets hurt again, we're going to be right back in the same position going, this is an area we need to address because this guy can't stay healthy. And I hate to say it, but it's been the truth.
It typically goes one of two ways with players like Heedle, right? You either trade him away now and you watch him blossom, or you keep him and he's one concussion away from his career being over. With that said, I thought it was heroic and I thought it was awesome to see him come back in that Carolina series and just make a push to play consistently with the team. But as time went on and as the Rangers got to the conference final, it was clear that he had not, you know, played real games because he couldn't, and he was kind of being thrusted into a really tough situation in the Eastern Conference Final. And it's hard for you to produce that way. So for me, it's an interesting topic that you bring up. If I were Chris Drury, I would explore my options in trading. I would.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to. And maybe if it's a center for center deal, fine. You know, maybe you build your bottom six in a different way because Hito's not going to crack top six. It's not.
No.
He's not Zibanejad and he's not Trocheck. So are you limiting him to a bottom six role? And is that where Heedle is most effective?
The
Maybe you trade
only
to a team that could use a young center and you bring in somewhat of a veteran and a winner.
if they want to play him on the right wing on the first line,
We
I
tried
mean,
that.
yeah,
They tried that in the playoffs. It wasn't effective. And again, maybe is that more of an indication on Kreider and Zibanejad, right? Because
we've talked about this a lot.
we've thrown Panarin on that first line and it hasn't worked. If it's not working with Panarin, I don't know who it's going to work with. So I'll give Hedel the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, maybe a 1-for-1 trade that could make sense for both teams.
So Kreider, uh, with his no trade protection, he has a full no move clause through July 1st, but once July 1st hits, he submits a 15 team no trade list if he is requested. So it's not out of the range of possibility that he gets moved because if you look at it, the cap could possibly jump another 6 million next year. But if we're gonna sign a guy like Patrick Kane for 2 to 3 years, we have to pay Igor a year from now. We still have 2 years of Trouba and Panarin, so they're gonna have to create cap space somehow. And
I think
you're definitely not getting rid of Vincent Trocheck because that would just be a stupid move.
I think it all comes down to trading Truba. You got to look at the contract that's the most movable right now. That makes the most sense to move. And just again, if you re-sign Lindgren and Schneider, it makes moving Truba a little bit less of a hit, you know. And maybe you give Zach Jones that opportunity. Maybe he's not sitting in the press box this time next year, when the Rangers are in the conference final. Maybe you look on the UFA market and bring in a smart veteran player that just plays the game as the simple way to take Trouba's spot. But $8 million, it's really valuable. You could move that $8 million from Trouba all the way to Shesterkin. And then, you know, and then you help yourself, in a big way once the time comes to pay Igor. Um, I think it comes down to trading Trouba, trading a big contract, but I don't see any other big contract getting moved. You could talk about Kreider all you want, but I don't think he's going to get traded. I think he's a career Ranger. I just do.
Yeah, with you on that one.
Zibanejad's a full no trade clause. You're not moving him.
No.
Fox, you're not moving him either. So there's one outlier here, and it's Trouba.
Yep. Do not envy Chris Drury at all for the position he's in.
I wouldn't buy him out though. I wouldn't buy Trouba out. I would
Not
try
this
and
offseason.
not this offseason. I completely agree. But I think
Next offseason, let's see how he plays.
but I think there might be a market to where the Rangers might not even have to attach a pick.
We'll
Maybe.
see.
We'll see. And that's Drury's job to figure out. As far as first line right wing shades that you mentioned, I think Kaner makes the most sense. I think we all needed to see what Patrick Kane looked like after the hip surgery, and he looked like the old Patrick Kane.
Yep.
Okay? He had a great year in Detroit. And you could say what you want about, oh, well, we need guys that are not going to shrivel down in the playoffs. Have you watched Patrick Kane in the playoffs?
Anybody who says that should be slapped.
Like, exactly. So I don't think that outside of Steven Stamkos, I don't think that there is a more valuable right wing to winning a Stanley Cup. Stamkos in the ideal situation, I don't think he's leaving Tampa Bay.
Nope.
I wouldn't hate Marchessault, to be honest. I wouldn't hate it. But again, if you're discussing a contract with Kane and Marchessault and they both come in around the same AAV, I'm picking Patrick Kane.
Mm.
So, so I think that's the move, and I think in a couple of weeks from now, I think we'll talk about the possibility of Kaner rejoining the Rangers is heating up even more than it is right now.
Oh yeah. And last but not least, before we end the episode, we have to talk about this because this kind of like shocked the entire hockey world. The Washington Capitals are buying or have bought Capfriendly, and as of July 7th, the website will be shut down and be made completely private. Screw the Capitals. This was a website literally made for the fans, and just the reasoning behind this, like because they don't want teams to use it as a weapon. You don't think every team has an internal system? It's
Every
like
team except the Capitals, apparently.
apparently. You remember the first thing I texted you when you sent me that tweet?
What'd you say? Remind me.
I said, what kind of cap circumventing are they planning on doing?
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't think the NHL has their own system in place? It's
It's
probably
definitely
better than cap friendlies.
again, and maybe it's it's going to sound weird, but like maybe it's acquiring the knowledge from the employees that have helped build this website up. Like there could be a lot of different reasons. Maybe it was the NHL saying we don't want this out here anymore, like buy it. Like you never know.
Yeah,
It does take an incredible resource away from fans. I mean, I'm on Cap Friendly right now.
same. I've
Wouldn't
been
be
checking it this
to
whole episode.
wouldn't be able to tell you. Some of the contracts. I mean, a Truba contract. Of course, everybody knows that. But yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. Puckpedia will be taking over in terms of the number one resource on where to get this type of news. I don't think this. I mean, we're not in the room. We don't know the reason why the Capitals, at the end of the day, bought Cap Friendly. Um, but I definitely do think that there is substance to what you're saying, Shades. And you know that it's a little bit perplexing that an organization like the Capitals, and again, they just won the Calder Cup for the second straight year.
Yeah,
Like
congrats to them, by the way.
with the Hershey Bears, and congratulations to them. Like I wouldn't have necessarily thought that they would, be in need of making this kind of purchase at this time. So it's disappointing for the fans, but there's a rhyme and a reason to everything. And, I guess the NHL and the Washington Capitals only know that.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't understand it, but like you said, we were not a fly on the wall while that was, going on, the transaction. But it's going to be a shame because Cap Friendly was literally the goat of everything you needed to know about any player.
Right. It was. And, Puckpedia has a chance to really rise here, because that's where fans will be going for all their cap questions.
We'll see, and who knows, maybe the people that are or were running Cap Friendly might pop up elsewhere and create a new website.
Yeah, right.
You
It
never
certainly
know.
could happen. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you never know. But rest in peace to Cap Friendly.
Rest in peace to Cat Friendly indeed. It was a great run.
Yeah, literally. Only the Cap Friendly could have hoisted the cup.
Well, every single one of those players that hoisted the cup last night, just might as well slap their AAV right on there.
Oh yeah.
We know because of Cap Friendly, how much all these guys are getting paid. So
Yeah, it was a good run, and I mean they'll probably still announce all the contracts on Twitter and shit. It's just not gonna be on Cap Friendly. It'll probably be on Puckpedia, which I have yet to check out, by the way. I'll
that
do
checks
that.
out pretty good.
Yeah, I'll do that after we're done recording.
But I'm very appreciative of what Cap Friendly brought to hockey fans all around the world. Maybe coming to an end, but you don't forget the positives that they brought in the past. So
Yeah.
definitely cognizant of that.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about Cap Friendly was also the buyout calculator. So I loved toying around with that thing.
Yeah, gonna have to spend some time this week. Just going through all those players, doing it one more time.
Oh yeah, for
Shut
sure.
down.
For sure. But holy crap, that was a hell of a hell of a lot to talk about. So much shit happened. NHL GMs tried to take away the spotlight before Game 7 with the trade. Fuck off. Uh, but yeah, that was congrats to the Panthers yet again. We got literally no shortage of shit coming up. Going to be right back here recording probably a week from today. It's currently Tuesday, June 25th. This episode's going to be out tomorrow. And man, just a loaded week. Stanley Cup
Although,
Final, Game 7 yesterday, the draft, free agency. I mean, we got Forbidden Door coming up on Sunday, which I am planning on being at. So hopefully
nice.
that'll be fun.
Where
Still
is
haven't
Forbidden? Yeah,
UBS. Still haven't gotten my tickets.
still haven't got your tickets. Okay.
Yeah, my friend owes me, so he's buying,
Okay. Gotcha.
and he knows he owes me, and he acknowledges it. So that'll be fun. I'm gonna have no voice Monday, which is gonna be great. But
Right.
oh, and I might have to do a freaking show Monday night, so I'm gonna need some cough drops or tea with honey or something to get my voice like back to normal. But we'll see. We'll see.
Pop drop cold brew dropping
Yeah.
next week.
Speaking. How about we end this episode with me chugging the rest of this, shall we?
Absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Pucks and Brews. While I get the episode number 63. So thank you very much for tuning in. Please do us all a favor, like the video, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any other place where you see the podcast. And hockey season's over, off season's just starting, but in a week from today, shit is really gonna start to die down, and the summer's really gonna get boring. So,
Yes, it is. But we'll have a jam-packed week this week, and you bet
oh yeah.
you and I will be back very, very soon to discuss the draft, free agency, and all that fun stuff.
And you know damn well there's going to be a lot more trades to talk about.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, these signings are even happening as we're doing the podcast, right? So
Oh yeah.
I bet by the time you're done editing this thing, there'll be like six more pieces of news.
Knowing my luck, there will be. So
Right. We'll be back to talk about all of it. So
we
chug
will
that thing.
we will be back. And Liam, cheers.
I'll cheers you with my phone. Cheers. I don't want to drink the phone.
Don't drink the phone. Don't
I'm
drink
not
the
gonna
phone.
I'm not gonna drink the phone.
Thank you for watching, everybody. We will see you all next week.